I remember the exact morning it started. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to read the back of a cereal box, and the letters just wouldn't cooperate. Not blurry enough to alarm me, not clear enough to ignore. I pushed the box a little further away, squinted slightly, and told myself what most people over 60 tell themselves. This is just getting older. Normal. Expected. Nothing to worry about. But something about that moment stayed with me. Because it wasn't just that morning. It was every morning after that. The newspaper felt harder to read in the same light I'd used for years. Driving at night started to feel less comfortable. And there was this subtle film, like looking through a window that was never quite clean, that I couldn't explain and couldn't shake. Have you felt something like that? Maybe not dramatic. Maybe just different. A slight change you've been brushing aside for weeks, or months, or even longer. I want you to stay with me here, because what I'm about to share took me a long time to understand, and it changed the way I look at everything. For the longest time, I assumed these were just the small indignities of aging. The eye doctor said my prescription had changed slightly. I updated my glasses. The film remained. The difficulty at night remained. The frustrating dance with lighting every time I tried to read remained. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started organizing my life around these limitations. Bigger font on my phone, more lamps in the living room, avoiding certain situations where I knew my eyes would let me down. What I didn't know, what nobody had told me clearly, was that these weren't just signs of age. They were signals, and there is a significant difference between those two things. A sign of age is something inevitable, something you accept and move on from. A signal is something your body is trying to communicate, asking you to pay attention before a small issue becomes a larger one. The question is whether we're listening. I wasn't listening. Not until I came across the work of Dr. Ethan Walker, a specialist in ocular health who has spent years studying exactly these kinds of gradual, quiet changes in vision, the ones that most people dismiss, and the ones that, according to him, matter the most. Dr. Walker explained something to me that I had never heard framed this way before. He said that the eye is one of the most metabolically active organs in the human body. It requires constant nourishment, constant protection, and constant support from the inside. And as we age, the systems that provide that support begin to work less efficiently. Not because aging is a disease, but because the cumulative effects of oxidative stress, reduced circulation, and nutritional gaps start to add up in ways that show up first and most visibly in our vision. He described the retina, the thin, light-sensitive layer at the back of the eye, as the part of us most vulnerable to these changes. It depends on specific nutrients, on adequate blood flow, on protection from the kind of cellular damage that builds up over decades of exposure to light, screens, environmental stress, and poor dietary habits. When those things aren't in balance, the retina starts to struggle. Not dramatically, not overnight. Silently. That word stopped me. Silently. Because that was exactly how I would have described what was happening to me. Silent. Gradual. Easy to explain away. Dr. Walker told me that the patients he sees most frequently are people who waited. People who accepted a slow deterioration as normal for years, not realizing that early attention, early support, could have made a meaningful difference. He wasn't talking about reversing time. He was talking about protecting what we have and supporting what our eyes need to keep functioning well. And here is where things started to click for me. The changes I had been experiencing, the blurriness, the light sensitivity, the eye fatigue, weren't just about needing stronger glasses. They were connected to something deeper, to oxidative damage accumulating in the delicate cells of the retina, to a protective layer of pigment that naturally thins as we age, leaving the macula more exposed, to a lack of specific antioxidants, nutrients like lutein, zeaxanthin, vitamins C and E, that the eye genuinely relies on and that most of us simply aren't getting enough of through diet alone. I asked Dr. Walker what made this a warning rather than just a fact of life. He paused before answering, which told me the answer mattered. He said, "The warning is in the silence. When these changes go unnoticed and unaddressed for long enough, they stop being gradual and become irreversible. The window where intervention helps is real, but it closes. That stayed with me for days. Think about the last time you really noticed your vision. Not just saw through it, but paid attention to it. The way certain things look slightly different than they did 5 years ago. The way you reach for more light automatically. The way reading has quietly become a little more effortful. Most of us adapt without questioning. But adaptation isn't the same as health. I want to ask you something directly. When you wake up in the morning and first open your eyes, is there any moment, even a brief one, where your vision feels less sharp than it should, where colors seem slightly muted, or where focusing takes just a second longer than it used to? Write yes in the comments if that sounds familiar. I genuinely want to know how many of us have been quietly experiencing this and saying nothing. Because one of the most important things Dr. Walker taught me is that this is not a rare experience. It is extremely common. And it is exactly that commonness that makes it dangerous. Because when something affects so many people, we start to accept it as inevitable rather than addressable. For those who want to better understand how to improve vision, reduce blurry sight, and discover habits that help protect eye health over time, we left a complete guide in the first link in the description. It expands naturally on everything we are discussing here. The adjustments Dr. Walker recommended weren't dramatic. They weren't surgical. They were the kind of foundational changes that sound almost too simple until you understand why they work. Supporting the retina with the specific nutrients it depends on. Reducing the oxidative load on the eye through small, consistent dietary habits. Protecting the delicate cells at the back of the eye from the cumulative damage that builds up invisibly over years. He was careful to tell me, and I want to be equally careful to tell you, that this isn't about a miracle solution. There is no single pill that reverses decades of ocular aging. What he described was a system, a set of habits, nutrients, and awareness that work together to give the eyes what they need to maintain function and resilience as we age. The same way we think about heart health or bone health or joint health, vision health deserves that same consistent attention. And the reason most people don't give it that attention is because the eye doesn't hurt. It doesn't send pain signals. It just quietly shifts, quietly adjusts, quietly signals through blurriness and fatigue and sensitivity until one day the changes become impossible to ignore. By then, the options are narrower. If you want to learn practical ways to maintain good vision, avoid cataracts, and discover which vitamins help support your eye health, we placed a simple guide in the first link in the description that summarizes everything in a clear and practical way. I am not the same person who pushed that cereal box away and told himself it was nothing. I pay attention now. I take my ocular health as seriously as any other part of my health. And the difference, the quiet, undramatic, real difference, has shown up in the way I move through my days with more ease, more confidence, more clarity. Not every change in vision after 60 should be accepted as the price of aging. Some of those changes are signals. And signals, if we catch them early enough, are actually gifts, a chance to act before it's too late. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. There is more to understand, and you deserve to understand it fully. Your eyes have carried you through every moment of your life. They deserve the same care in return.